He saw a woman in nursing scrubs walking through Raleigh Towne Square Mall with a slight limp, favoring her left side. He didn't see the old burn scars on her forearms when her sleeves rode up, the kind that come from burning wreckage. He didn't see the legend who held 11 lives together in Sangin with nothing but field dressings and sheer will. Brooke Sullivan moves through the weekend crowd with practiced invisibility, her eyes tracking exits and choke points out of habit. The mall thrums with the particular Saturday energy, families clustered around storefronts, teenagers in packs, the ambient drone of mall speakers playing something soft and forgettable. She favors her left side when she walks, a compensation so natural after 3 years that most people don't notice. They see the scrubs. Sometimes they thank her for her service without knowing she's given more than most will ever understand. The white compression sleeve under her right cuff hides nothing. Anyone looking close enough would see the pale, rippled tissue where shrapnel tore through muscle and left its signature in scar tissue. But nobody looks close. That was the point of this life, the civilian life. Invisibility. Normalcy. A job that meant something without the weight of command. She's setting up a blood pressure screening booth for Sacred Heart Hospital's community outreach program near the mall center court, arranging pamphlets and the portable monitor with the same precision she once used to pack field dressings. 2 tables. Vital signs log. Sign-up sheet. Simple. Useful. Nothing that required anyone to know who she actually was. The fluorescent lighting overhead hums like a fluorescent lights always do, that particular frequency that never quite feels natural. She adjusts the banner, free screening, Sacred Heart Hospital, and glances across the open space toward the fountain. That's when she notices the commotion. A cluster of teenagers, maybe 5 of them, surrounds a wheelchair near the fountain's edge. They're filming something on their phones, holding them up like weapons. Brooke's breath doesn't change, but her shoulders tighten. She recognizes the posture of mockery from 1,000 small cruelties. A man sits in the wheelchair, older, maybe 60, with a kind of straight spine that comes from military training, the kind that persists even when the body beneath it has been broken. His left leg ends at mid-thigh. A prosthetic, polished steel and composite materials that catch the mall's light. Todd Brennan stands 15 feet away. Assistant General Manager. Crisp navy polo with an embroidered mall logo. Khakis creased sharp enough to cut. He's scrolling through his tablet, eyes tracking across the screen with the performance of someone deeply engaged in something urgent. Occasionally, his gaze flicks toward the teenagers and the man in the wheelchair. He sees them. Brooke watches his eyes move away each time. A choice. Deliberate. Practiced. The teenagers don't realize they're being performed for. That's what the mockery always is, a performance, a demonstration of power for whoever's watching. One of them, a tall boy in a basketball jersey, makes an exaggerated salute, shoulders jerking up in an approximation of parade ground precision. The others laugh. Their phones keep recording. Brooke's hand moves to her scrubs pocket without conscious decision. The dog tag inside is cool against her fingers. Single chain, broken at one link. She doesn't take it out. She hasn't taken it out in public in 3 years, but she touches it the way some people touch a rosary. The metal is warmed by her body heat. The insignia is worn from fingers, 5th Group, Special Forces Command. The same unit her son wore. The same command structure that brought him home in a flag-draped casket from Sangin Valley, Helmand Province. 3 years. September 14th. She doesn't think about dates anymore, but her body remembers. Every calendar knows. The wheelchair-bound man's shoulders curve slightly inward. Not shame. Brooke knows the difference between shame and survival posture. This is protection. The same posture she's seen in soldiers who've learned that drawing attention is dangerous. The teenager's laughter gets louder. One of them mimics the man's prosthetic leg with an exaggerated limp, stepping side to side in grotesque pantomime. Their phones keep recording. Brennan turns a page on his tablet. Brooke's hands are steady. The trembling, when it comes, will be restraint, not fear, not rage, but the accumulated pressure of 1,000 moments where she's chosen not to act. That trembling hasn't arrived yet. Right now, her hands are surgeon steady. Her breathing hasn't changed. This is what muscle memory looks like when you've trained your body to remain composed while your mind catalogues threats and calculates intervention points. She notices the chain around the veteran's neck before anything else. A dog tag on a broken chain, hanging below his shirt collar. The metal catches light and reflects it upward toward his face. Even from 15 feet away, she can see the insignia. Not the same unit, different command structure. But the era matches. The cut of his uniform, the way he wears the prosthetic like a soldier rather than a disabled person, the rigid spine despite the wheelchair, all of it speaks the same language she speaks fluently. The dog tag swings as one of the teenagers leans in closer, phone extended. The insignia is visible now. Clear. Unmistakable. Brooke's left hand touches her own thigh. Where shrapnel once tore through. Where her own prosthetic begins beneath the compression sleeve. She was lucky. She got to keep the limb even after it tried to kill her. The infection was secondary. The real injury was the choice, amputation or 18 months of surgery and physical therapy that left her walking with a limp she'll carry forever. She chose the limp. Some people choose differently. Some people end up in wheelchairs in shopping malls while teenagers film them on their phones. Todd Brennan glances up again. His eyes meet Brooke's across the open space of the mall. There's a moment, brief, unmistakable, where he registers her presence. Where he sees her watching him not intervene. His expression doesn't change. He looks back at his tablet. The choice is made. The performance continues. Brooke's breathing is still steady. Her hands are still steady. But something has shifted in the space between her ribs. The dog tag in her pocket feels heavier. The burn tissue under her sleeves feels like it's burning again, even though that's impossible. Scar tissue doesn't burn. It just remembers. One of the teenagers makes another salute, more exaggerated than the last. The veteran's jaw tightens. Just barely. Just enough for someone trained in reading human stress responses to notice. His hands grip the wheelchair's armrests. His chest expands once with a breath that looks like it cost something. Brennan turns another page on his tablet. The fluorescent lights hum their artificial frequency. The mall speakers play something about love and forever that nobody's actually listening to. And in the space between those sounds, Brooke Sullivan stands at her blood pressure screening booth, her hand touching the dog tag in her pocket, watching a man in a wheelchair get filmed and mocked by children while the person responsible for protecting him chooses to look away. The phone in her scrub's pocket feels like it's waiting for something. But that's not this moment yet. Not quite. She doesn't know it, but in exactly 47 seconds, the man in the wheelchair is going to collapse. In exactly 2 minutes and 12 seconds, Todd Brennan's choices are going to stop mattering because something far more urgent will arrive at Raleigh Towne Square Mall. In exactly 3 hours and 19 minutes, Brooke Sullivan's entire life is going to change shape, and none of it will look like she expected. But right now, she's just a nurse at a blood pressure screening booth, watching a veteran get mocked by teenagers while a manager looks away. Her hand is steady. Her breathing is steady. The restraint hasn't trembled yet. That's still coming. The teenagers laugh again. Their phones keep recording. The dog tag in Brooke's pocket is warm against her fingers. Brooke's hand settles on the veteran's shoulder like an anchor. The warmth of his wool jacket seeps through her palm. Around them, the mall fountain burbles its indifferent soundtrack, water against stone, the white noise of commerce, the sound of a world that doesn't notice when someone gets torn apart. She doesn't raise her voice. That's what makes it land. Walk away now, or I'll make sure your parents see exactly what kind of people they're raising. The words move through the cluster of teenagers like current through salt water. One of them lowers his phone. Another shifts his weight. There's no threat in her tone, just the flat statement of someone describing inevitable consequences. The kind of calm that comes from having already survived the worst things the world can offer. They scatter in 3 seconds flat. The youngest one, couldn't be more than 16, mutters something about psycho nurse ladies as he backs away. But he's moving. They all are. The mall around them fills back in with the ambient hum of Saturday shoppers, people pushing strollers and holding shopping bags, utterly unaware that a moment ago, a man's dignity was being live-streamed to strangers. Brooke kneels beside Colonel James Reeves's wheelchair, her knees cracking softly against the tile floor. The dog tag catches the mall's fluorescent light, worn metal on a broken chain, hanging from his neck. She stares at it for exactly 1 second too long. Same unit insignia. Same command structure. Same dog tags that came home 3 years ago in a cardboard box marked returned effects, except hers were attached to a folded flag and a casket. A single tear escapes down her cheek before she can stop it. She doesn't cry. Not in public. Not since Sangin. But her son's command is hanging from this man's neck, and her hands are moving without permission, wiping the tear away with the back of her wrist, maintaining eye contact with Reeves, her voice steady as a surgical laser. "You're okay." "They're gone." Reeves's breathing is labored. His hand trembles slightly as he reaches toward her arm. "Thank you," he manages. I didn't know how to make them stop." "You don't have to." She squeezes his shoulder once. "That's done." That's when Todd Brennan arrives. He strides across the mall floor with his assistant general manager's polo tucked precisely into khakis, his name badge catching the light like a shield. His face is flushed, not the pink of embarrassment, but the deeper red of a man watching his authority get questioned in public. 20 security cameras monitor this mall. 50 shoppers saw what just happened. And none of them watched Brooke approach the teenagers. All of them watched her defend someone he chose to ignore. "You need to leave," Brennan says. His finger jabs toward her, a gesture designed to separate her from the veteran, to mark her as the problem. "You're causing a disturbance and harassing our younger guests." Brooke rises without rushing. She meets his eyes without flinching. She takes one measured breath, and in that breath, her composure locks into place, the same composure that kept her functional while applying improvised chest seals from MRE packaging in compounds with no power and no supply line. The kind of calm that is not peace but the absence of panic. "I stopped harassment," she says. Her voice is level, almost conversational. "You watched it happen." Brennan's jaw tightens. His hand drops. For a moment, he looks like a man realizing he's standing in front of someone he doesn't have a complete understanding of. But the moment passes, and institutional authority reasserts itself, the reassurance that comes with a title, a uniform of sorts, and the knowledge that he controls access to this place. "Listen, Scrubs," he says, and the nickname is meant to diminish. "I don't know what mall cop fantasy you're living, but you're a temp vendor at a health booth. You don't have authority here." He turns to the small crowd that's gathered, maybe 15 people now, drawn by the confrontation the way people are drawn to any disruption in the quotidian flow of commerce. "This woman is interfering with our guests and making everyone uncomfortable. Security is removing her booth." It's a lie told with the precision of someone who knows the audience won't fact-check him. Brooke didn't interfere. She protected. But the distinction won't matter once Brennan's version becomes the official record. Reeves tries to speak. His breathing has gotten worse. There's a tightness around his eyes that wasn't there 30 seconds ago. Cardiac stress. Brooke's trained to read it the way other people read words on a page. "Sir, I apologize for this disruption," Brennan says, talking over the veteran with practiced professionalism. "We'll get you somewhere quiet." He doesn't wait for a response. He nods to 2 security guards who materialize from the crowd, summoned by radio while Brooke was still kneeling, and his entire body language shifts. The moment has been framed. The narrative has been established. He is protecting guests. She is the problem. "Let me help him," Brooke says. Her voice doesn't rise. It doesn't plead. "You've helped enough," Brennan replies. The security guards move her away from the wheelchair with a professional courtesy that makes it impossible to resist without escalating. Brooke doesn't resist. She's learned that lesson in places Raleigh Towne Square Mall doesn't have names for. Sometimes you move when you're told to move, and you watch, and you wait. Sometimes the fighting comes later. The worst part isn't being escorted away from the veteran. The worst part comes 20 minutes later in the mall security office on the 4th floor, a small room with laminated policies on the walls and a desk that smells like stale coffee and printed paper. Brennan has confiscated her vendor badge. The plastic rectangle sits on the desk between them like evidence at a trial. He's typing something, a formal incident report, she assumes, while 2 security guards stand by the door. One of them looks deeply uncomfortable. The other is studying the ceiling. You physically accosted minors, Brennan says, reading from his screen. You practiced medicine without proper credentials on mall property. You created a public spectacle. Brooke sits in the chair across from him. Her hands are folded in her lap. She doesn't interrupt. She doesn't defend. She simply waits for him to finish, the way you wait for a child to finish their story before you explain how the world actually works. I defended a veteran from harassment you deliberately ignored, she says when he pauses. Her voice is the same temperature as the air between them. Brennan still doesn't look up. His fingers keep moving across the keyboard. The fluorescent lights hum their mechanical song overhead. That's your interpretation, Scrubs, he says. Here's mine, you're banned from this property, and I'm filing a formal complaint with Sacred Heart about your conduct. The words land exactly where he intended them to land. He's moved from social humiliation to institutional leverage. He's upgraded from dismissal to sabotage. His hands are shaking slightly, not from anger, but from the effort of pretending he has authority he doesn't actually possess. Brooke picks up her badge from the desk. She doesn't ask for it. She simply takes it, and Brennan doesn't stop her. The 2 security guards are very interested in the ceiling now. And when they call my medical school, she asks. Her hand closes around the badge. Plastic and metal, warm against her skin. When they call my previous employers? Brennan finally looks up. His face is the color of old brick. When they find out what I actually am? Brooke's voice drops, not louder, but lower, the way a pilot's voice gets lower in an emergency. You might want to consider whether this complaint is something you want documented in a federal system. She stands. She walks out. The security guards part for her like water. No one tries to stop her. The worst part, the part that actually breaks something in her chest, comes 2 hours later. She's sitting in her apartment, a small 1-bedroom in Raleigh that smells like vanilla candles and loneliness, when the email arrives. Sacred Heart Hospital HR Director Patricia Chen has forwarded Todd Brennan's formal complaint, and the system has triggered an automatic background investigation per hospital policy. The email references unauthorized medical intervention. It references aggressive behavior toward minors. It references misrepresentation of hospital affiliation, as if wearing nursing scrubs to a mall blood pressure screening booth is some kind of fraud. Her supervisor, Dr. Marcus Webb, no relation to the IT specialist she'll meet in exactly 9 days, though both men are Marines, calls her within the hour. His voice is professional. His voice is the sound of institutional machinery turning. You're on administrative leave pending investigation, he says. Don't come to the hospital. The line goes dead. Brooke sits in her kitchen, hands flat on the table, staring at the single dog tag on her coffee table. She picked it up when she got home. She doesn't remember walking into her bedroom and removing it from the box, but it's in her hand now, and the metal is warm, and the inscription reads Reeves, James Col, a U.S. Army Special Forces OPOS Relig, Cath. Same unit insignia her son wore. Same command structure that brought him home in a flag-draped casket. But that wasn't the worst part. Colonel Reeves's breathing changed first. A shift from steady to labored, like an engine losing compression. His hand moved to his chest, not a casual gesture, but a grip, fingers splayed across the fabric of his shirt as if he could squeeze the pain away. His face drained. Not gradually. In seconds. The color vanished like someone had pulled a plug. Brooke saw it. The subtle slack in his jaw. The way his eyes widened just slightly, not fear, but recognition. He'd felt this before. Maybe in a field hospital. Maybe in a Black Hawk en route to surgery. His body knew what was happening even if his mind was still catching up. "Code," he whispered. "I'm." Brennan's voice cut through the mall noise first. He was already on his radio, and his tone had shifted. Not concern. Calculation. The crispness of someone executing a plan. "Security, this is Todd. I need the vagrant removed from the fountain area. And the nurse causing the disturbance, escort her out. Now. Pending police report for assault on minors and creating a public spectacle." The words came through the radio like poison gas, slow, invisible, lethal in their precision. He was documenting. Building a record. Every word was a thread he was weaving, and Brooke understood the pattern. This wasn't mercy. This was erasure. But muscle memory doesn't care about politics. Brooke moved before her conscious mind caught up. The chair tilted backward in her hands, smooth, practiced, the motion of someone who'd done this 1,000 times in worse conditions. Sangin. A compound with no power. No supply line. Hostile fire on 3 sides. She'd improvised there. She'd saved lives with duct tape, field dressing, and the kind of calm that comes from already surviving the worst. She checked his airway. Chin tilt. Head lift. Breathing. Shallow, rapid, 32 breaths per minute, too fast, oxygen saturation dropping. She could see it in the way his lips were starting to pale. "Cardiac," she said to him, not to the gathering crowd. "You're having a cardiac event. I'm calling EMS." Her voice was steady. That was the training. That was Sangin. That was 3 tours worth of muscle memory that refused to stop working just because she'd taken off the uniform. The mall silence had become something physical. A weight. Shoppers were stopping now, phones already out, already filming. The same people who'd laughed at Reeves were now watching a different show. Brooke's hands moved on their own. She loosened his shirt collar. Checked his pulse at the carotid, already tachycardic, over 120 and climbing. His skin was clammy. Diaphoretic. Every sign was screaming what she already knew, his heart was failing. Acute coronary syndrome, maybe an MI. His left ventricle shutting down like a door slamming closed. She pulled out her phone and dialed 911. "What's your emergency?" The dispatcher's voice was calm. "Professional. 68-year-old male, wheelchair-bound, presenting with acute chest pain, diaphoresis, shortness of breath. Heart rate 128, respiratory rate 32, pale mucous membranes. Possible acute MI. Location, Raleigh Towne Square Mall, near the fountain. Security might be an issue, I need EMS to be direct." The dispatcher paused. 1 beat. Then, they're en route. For minutes. For minutes. 240 seconds. Plenty of time for a heart to stop. Plenty of time for oxygen to deplete. Plenty of time for Reeves to move from critical to dead. Brooke positioned him better. Semi-reclining. She opened his fist, he'd been clenching his chest like he could hold the pain in place, and felt his radial pulse. Weak. Thready. The pulse of someone whose heart was drowning. "Colonel," she said. "Look at me." His eyes found hers. "I'm a nurse," she said. "My name is Brooke. You're having a heart attack. EMS is for minutes out. I need you to take slow breaths with me. Can you do that?" He nodded. The smallest movement. The kind of acknowledgement that says, "I trust you. I know what you are." She breathed with him. In through the nose. For counts. Hold for 4. Out through the mouth. 8 counts. The rhythm of someone who'd learned to control her own body so completely that she could teach it to strangers in crisis. Brennan was standing 15 feet away, his radio still in his hand, his face flushed in a way that had nothing to do with concern. He was watching her work. Watching her hands move with the precision of someone trained in trauma. Watching her speak to the patient in the language of medical authority. Watching the mask slip. She didn't acknowledge him. Didn't break rhythm. Didn't flinch. The sirens arrived in 3 minutes, not 4. They cut through the mall like a blade. Red lights painting the fountain. EMTs moving fast, with the urgent walk of people who've seen this show before. Chest pain, the lead EMT said. For minutes ago, Brooke replied. Sudden onset. Diaphoretic. Heart rate 128 at onset, respiratory rate 32. Pale mucous membranes. Possible acute MI. I started monitoring vitals at the scene. The EMT's eyes moved to her. Recognition. The look someone gives when they understand they're talking to a professional. Not a bystander. Not just a nurse. Help us get him up, the EMT said. She did. Her hands guided the stretcher. Her voice continued the clinical narrative. She gave them the timeline, the vital signs, the trajectory. She spoke the language of medicine the way soldiers speak in a firefight, with precision, without hesitation, without apology. The ambulance doors closed and the sirens wailed away, taking Reeves to whoever he'd become in the next hour. Stable. Dead. Something in between. Brennan walked toward her before the sirens even faded. His jaw was clenched. His eyes had gone narrow in a way that meant he'd recalibrated his entire strategy. You need to come with me, he said. Not a request. A command. The tone of someone who'd suddenly realized the situation had shifted, and he needed to regain control before it shifted again. She followed him to the mall security office. A small room with monitors showing every corner of the building. She'd been on 3 of those screens in the last 15 minutes. Your vendor badge, Brennan said, holding out his hand. She removed the temporary credential from her scrub pocket and placed it in his palm. He pocketed it without looking. You are banned from this property, effective immediately, he said. Unauthorized medical intervention. Creating a public spectacle. Interfering with mall operations. I'm filing a formal complaint with Sacred Heart Hospital and with Mall Corporate. There will be legal consequences for assault on minors. He wasn't done. The words kept coming, measured and cold, each one a brick in the wall he was building around her. He spoke like someone documenting a crime scene. Like someone who'd already won. But Brooke understood something that Brennan didn't. She understood that you can't win against someone who's already lost everything. That panic, true panic, only comes to people who still have something to lose. And she'd learned in Sangin that the most dangerous people aren't the ones with the most to gain. They're the ones with the most to prove. Am I free to go? She asked. Yes, he said. Don't come back. She walked out of the mall into the parking lot. The rain was starting, just a mist at first, then something heavier. The kind of rain that soaks through everything. Her scrubs. Her resolve. Her carefully constructed civilian life. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Major Sullivan. A woman's voice. Professional. Military-coded in its precision. My name is Commander Sarah Reeves. I'm Colonel Reeves's daughter. I'm a JAG officer with the Navy. My father's in the ambulance right now heading to Sacred Heart. The EMT said a woman at the scene provided pre-hospital medical intervention that may have saved his life. I'd like to talk to you. Tonight, if possible. 2 weeks later, Brooke stood at the bus stop outside Sacred Heart Hospital, rain hammering the concrete like applause nobody wanted. The cardboard box in her arms was already softening, the bottom beginning to give way. Inside, a cracked coffee mug with "World's Okayest Nurse" printed in fading letters, a dying succulent with soil packed around withered leaves, and a framed photograph of her son in his Special Forces uniform, the same face she'd seen in Colonel James Reeves's eyes at the mall fountain. The termination hearing had taken 14 minutes. Dr. Marcus Caldwell, Sacred Heart's chief operating officer, had sat across from her in a windowless conference room with 2 other administrators flanking him like sentinels of protocol. His voice carried the smooth certainty of someone who'd never had to explain himself twice. "Miss Sullivan, Mr. Todd Brennan's account of the mall incident is quite detailed. Aggressive behavior. Unauthorized medical intervention. Misrepresentation of hospital affiliation. Creating public disturbance." He'd paused, adjusting his glasses with the precision of a man performing concern. "These are serious allegations that reflect poorly on Sacred Heart's community standing." Brooke had responded with the composure of someone who'd held wounded soldiers' hands while waiting for medevac helicopters. "I stopped teenagers from mocking a disabled veteran while mall management watched." Caldwell had waved this away like smoke. "More concerning is what our background investigation uncovered. Inconsistencies in your employment history. A security clearance you never disclosed. Gaps you cannot adequately explain." His eyes had narrowed. "We require transparency from our staff, Major." The word had hung in the air, Major, not a question but an accusation. Somewhere in federal databases, her classified security clearance still burned like an ember. The hospital's panic had escalated beyond the original mall incident the moment they'd uncovered it. Not a credential. A liability. Something to excise immediately. Immediate termination, Caldwell had said, for conduct unbecoming, failure to disclose relevant background information, and bringing negative attention to this institution. He'd personally escorted her to her locker in the break room, watching as she'd packed. Badge. Stethoscope. The photo. The mug, her gift from the pediatrics unit 3 years ago, before her son died, before she'd transferred to the ER to stay busy, to not think, to keep her hands moving because stopping meant feeling. Caldwell had stood 5 feet away, arms crossed, making sure she didn't steal anything more valuable than her own dignity. Now, at the bus stop, the rain intensified. She set the box down on the metal bench and the cardboard collapsed. The mug shattered, a clean break, the ceramic pieces scattering across the wet concrete like shrapnel. The succulent's pot cracked. Soil spilled. Her son's photograph landed face down in a puddle. She knelt to gather the pieces, her hands moving on their own, muscle memory from a different kind of rescue. 1 measured breath. 2. 3. Then the breathing became something else, something her body was doing whether she wanted it to or not, and she was sitting in the rain with the photograph pressed against her chest, the broken dog tag chain from her pocket wrapped around her fingers like a lifeline. A car pulled up. Black sedan. Government plates. Commander Sarah Reeves stepped out with an umbrella, her dress uniform immaculate despite the downpour. She was Colonel James Reeves's daughter. Brooke knew this from the way she moved, that same precision, that same understanding that some situations demanded immediate action. Sarah didn't ask permission. She simply opened the passenger door. "Get in. We're not done fighting." Brooke looked at her, then at the rain, then at the ruined box and the scattered soil and the photograph that was already starting to blur. She got in. Sarah drove in silence for 3 blocks. The umbrella lay across the back seat, water dripping onto leather upholstery. When she finally spoke, her voice was low and controlled, the kind of calm that came from being trained to deliver devastating news clearly. "My father called me from the ambulance," Sarah said. "He told me everything. About the teenagers. About Brennan watching it happen. About you stopping the whole thing, then saving his life when his heart failed." She took a turn with one hand, eyes on the road. "He also told me you didn't mention your service." "He didn't ask." "No. He wouldn't." Sarah's jaw tightened. "My father served with Major Elijah Donovan in Sangin. Donovan was your commanding officer. He said you were the finest combat medic he'd ever seen, better than the trauma surgeons at Kandahar, because you had something they didn't. She glanced over. Scars that taught you how to stay calm when everything was collapsing. Brooke didn't respond. The rain drummed against the windshield. Sacred Heart fired you because of Todd Brennan's complaint, Sarah continued. But the hospital panicked when they uncovered your security clearance in federal databases. That clearance doesn't just disappear. It stays active. It means somewhere the Pentagon still has you classified. She took another turn. Dr. Caldwell, did you know he and Brennan were college roommates? No. They coordinated this, Sarah said flatly. The complaint was orchestrated. The investigation was weaponized. And the termination was guaranteed the moment Caldwell realized who you actually were. Veterans with active clearances are liability nightmares for civilian hospitals. Too much exposure. Too much risk. Her voice carried the weight of someone who'd spent years defending people against exactly this kind of institutional cowardice. It's called retaliation against a protected class. It's also federal. The car pulled up to a parking garage. Sarah cut the engine. I'm filing a complaint with the EEOC, Sarah said. Disability discrimination because Brennan ignored the mocking of my father. Failure to maintain safe premises. And destruction of evidence because we both know Brennan tried to delete security footage of the whole thing. She opened her door. But first, we need to talk to the people who can make this hurt in the ways that matter. 2 days later, the mall's corporate office held 14 people in a conference room that smelled like industrial coffee and expensive leather. Colonel James Reeve sat in his wheelchair at the head of the table, his presence somehow larger than the space around him. Todd Brennan occupied a folding chair near the corner, sweating visibly through his best suit, the one he'd bought years ago and never found occasion to wear. He had the look of a man who'd suddenly understood that his choices had consequences that extended beyond his imagination. Sarah Reeve stood, her Navy JAG uniform crisp as paper. She opened a folder and her hands trembled, not from fear but from the controlled fury of a woman about to dismantle someone methodically. Before we discuss liability, Sarah said, you need to understand who my father was defending. She slid a document across the polished table. Security file. Flagged. Classified. Brooke Sullivan. Major, United States Army Special Forces. Medical discharge following combat operations in Sangin, Helmand Province. The room went dead silent. Major Sullivan served under my direct authority, Colonel Reeve said, his voice carrying the weight of command. She held the Bronze Star with valor. A pause. The corporate executives were leaning forward now, understanding the geometry of their era. 2 Purple Hearts. Another pause. And she personally saved 11 lives during a casualty evacuation under hostile fire. A broad-shouldered man in civilian clothes stood from the back of the room. His bearing was military, but his clothes were carefully ordinary, a choice made deliberately. Lieutenant Commander Bill Mackenzie, Navy SEAL Team 3, retired. I coordinated with Major Sullivan's unit during joint operations in Helmand Province. He let that land. SEAL Team. Not rumors. Documented. She ran triage in a forward operating compound with no power, no supply line, and hostile fire on 3 sides. I watched her improvise a chest seal from MRE packaging to save a Marine with a sucking chest wound. I've never seen anyone, regardless of rank, keep that many people alive with that little resources. Brennan's face had gone the color of old plaster. Is it true, the corporate VP asked carefully, that you attempted to delete security footage of this incident, Mr. Brennan? Or there was a server issue. Marcus Webb stood. Marine Corps tattoo visible on his neck. His ID badge read IT security. Marcus Webb. I maintain automatic cloud backups of all surveillance feeds per corporate policy. When Mr. Brennan attempted to delete footage 3 days ago, I received an automated alert. He slid a USB drive across the table with the precision of a man handling ordnance. I backed up every frame and reported the tampering to both corporate counsel and federal authorities. The logs are documented. The VP didn't look at Brennan again. Colonel Reeves asked to speak with Brooke privately. Sarah made the call from the parking lot, and 40 minutes later, Brooke entered the conference room. The colonel extended his hand from his wheelchair, and when she took it, his grip was solid, certain. "Major Sullivan," he said, "your son was one of the finest soldiers I ever commanded. I should have recognized you at the mall. I'm sorry." For the first time in 3 years, she didn't fight the tears. "He loved serving under you, sir." The rain outside drummed against the conference room windows like distant mortar fire, the sound of a world finally understanding what it had almost lost. The rain outside drummed against the conference room windows like distant mortar fire, the sound of a world finally understanding what it had almost lost. Sarah Reeves sat at the polished mahogany table, her navy dress uniform crisp as a blade, her eyes fixed on the corporate VP who'd called this emergency session. The mall's board had convened within 48 hours of her federal complaint, the papers served with the precision of a surgical strike. She opened the security file with steady hands. Brooke Sullivan. Major, United States Army Special Forces. Medical discharge following combat operations in Sangin Province, 2019. Sarah read each line like a verdict. The room held its breath. She did not look up from the document. Honorable discharge. Full credentials. Licensed RN with advanced trauma certification. That's who Todd Brennan accused of being a disturbance. The VP shifted in his chair. 3 lawyers flanked him, pale men in dark suits who suddenly looked like they'd been caught holding the wrong end of a rifle. One of them whispered something. The VP raised a hand. "Let her finish." Colonel James Reeves wheeled himself to the head of the table, his chair positioned with the precision of a commander taking the floor. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of 2 decades of authority, the kind that doesn't need to raise itself because every person in the room already knows they're in the presence of someone who's given orders under fire. "Major Sullivan served under my direct command." He paused. Each word fell like a boot on concrete. She held the Bronze Star with valor. 2 Purple Hearts. During a casualty evacuation in Sangin, hostile fire from 3 positions, she personally saved 11 lives. 11. With a first aid kit and the kind of calm that only comes from having already survived the worst. He turned his wheelchair slightly, facing Todd Brennan directly. "You stood 15 feet away and scrolled through your tablet while teenagers mocked a disabled veteran." Major Sullivan didn't scroll. Major Sullivan moved. The door opened. A broad-shouldered man in civilian clothes rose from the back of the room, jeans, dark polo, scarred knuckles that told their own story. He didn't introduce himself with a name. He said it with a call sign. "I'm known as Gator. I led SEAL Team 3 operations in Helmand Province when Major Sullivan's unit coordinated support for our compound extraction." His voice was steady as a concrete foundation. "She ran triage in a facility with no power, no supply line, and hostile fire on 3 sides. AK-47s, RPGs, sniper positions on the eastern ridge. I've worked with 247 combat medics across 15 years of operations. I have never, not once, seen anyone keep that many people alive with that little resources while rounds were still coming through the walls." She didn't hesitate. She didn't call for permission. She moved. Brennan's face had gone the color of old concrete. He opened his mouth. His lawyer gripped his arm. The corporate VP's eyes had narrowed into something that looked like a predator recognizing prey it had momentarily mistaken for harmless. Sarah Reeves set down another folder. Inside it was a photograph of a security server, its hard drives dark and silent. The mall's IT specialist is Marcus Webb. 12-year Marine Corps veteran, honorable discharge, SIGINT background. When Mr. Brennan ordered the deletion of security footage from the fountain incident, Corporal Webb had already created a backup, something he did as standard protocol for all high-profile incidents. He retained encrypted copies and reported the deletion attempt to both corporate HR and the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The silence that followed was so complete you could hear the fluorescent lights humming their artificial lament. The corporate VP turned to Todd Brennan. His mouth opened. His hand raised. And then it fell back to the table without a word being spoken. Whatever he'd been about to say wasn't worth the legal landmine it would trigger. Marcus Webb stood from the back of the conference room. He was younger than expected, mid-30s, with the bearing of someone who'd learned to stand at parade rest and never fully unlearned it. Every frame from that afternoon is documented. Every interaction. Every moment Mr. Brennan chose not to intervene. I have copies filed with FBI Cyber Division and the Department of Veterans Affairs Office of Inspector General. He paused. Sir, you should know, deleting evidence of disability discrimination under federal law carries penalties. I made sure the federal investigators understood the timeline. The VP's lawyer whispered something urgent. The VP nodded once, sharply. He turned to Brooke Sullivan, who sat in the middle chair of the table, her hands folded in her lap, her expression carrying the kind of absolute stillness that only comes from having learned not to give anyone anything to use against you. We were wrong, he said. The words came out like they tasted like copper. Sacred Heart Hospital was wrong. The investigation was improperly expedited. Dr. Caldwell failed to disclose his personal relationship with Mr. Brennan, creating a conflict of interest that compromised the termination decision. He set down a folder. We're offering full reinstatement with back pay. A public apology. A settlement. Sarah Reeves smiled the way a lawyer smiles when she's watching her opponent walk into a trap he dug himself. Not interested. The VP blinked. I'm sorry. You're trying to buy silence. We have USERA violations, Uniformed Services Employment and Re-Employment Rights Act. You fired a veteran based on her service record, with no legitimate cause, coordinating that firing with a civilian who'd harassed her for defending another disabled veteran. That's federal law. My counteroffer stands alone. Sarah turned to Brooke. Major Sullivan will return to Sacred Heart, but not as a staff nurse. She creates a new position, Regional Healthcare Coordinator for Veteran Services. She develops protocols, trains staff, builds systems to ensure this never happens to another veteran at your hospital. The VP's face had gone pale. His lawyers were already calculating the cost. Federal settlements for USERA violations could reach 6 figures. A new position with authority, salary, and the ability to implement changes hospital-wide? That was 9 figures of liability exposure if they refused and it went to litigation. Done, he said. The word hung in the air like the final note of a song that had been waiting 3 months to be sung. Brooke Sullivan didn't move. She didn't celebrate. She didn't even acknowledge the victory. She simply looked at Colonel Reeves, and something passed between them, the kind of understanding that only exists between people who've survived things that would break most people. 6 months later, Brooke walked through Raleigh Towne Square Mall in business casual, charcoal blazer over a white shirt, her Sacred Heart Regional Healthcare Coordinator badge hanging from her neck like a medal. The mall had changed. New security protocols, mandatory disability accommodation training, surveillance footage backed up to 3 separate secure servers. Management had rebuilt itself from the ground down, and every employee knew the story of what happened at the fountain. She was meeting Colonel Reeves for coffee, a standing appointment, monthly, where they discussed the training program she'd implemented at Sacred Heart. New protocols for recognizing combat-related medical presentations. Liaisons trained to work with veteran patients. A network of providers who understood that sometimes the phrase "just a nurse" could carry the weight of entire battalions of skill that no badge could quantify. Near the security office, staffed now with actual security professionals trained in trauma-informed protocols, someone called her name. Todd Brennan stood in the hallway, wearing the midnight blue uniform of Sacred Heart Hospital night security. 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. shift. The only job that would hire him after the mall terminated his contract, and the news story ran with the headline, "Mall manager fired nurse who defended veteran, then destroyed evidence." His face had aged 5 years in 6 months. The stubble along his jaw looked permanent, like shame had taken up residence in the follicles. Major Sullivan, I? He trailed off, searching for something that didn't exist. Words that could say what he'd said. Actions that could undo what he'd done. I just wanted to. Brooke stopped. She turned. She met his eyes with the kind of look that said, some people protect, and some people just get in the way. The kind of look that carries the weight of Sangin, of compound medicine under fire, of watching her son's flag-draped casket come home. She took one measured breath. You saw someone who needed defending, she said quietly. And you chose your pride. Live with that. She walked away without waiting for a response. Brennan stood alone under the fluorescent lights, beneath a ceiling that suddenly felt very low. At the coffee shop, Colonel Reeves was already waiting with 2 cups steaming on the small table between them. His dog tag caught the light, the same unit insignia that had been on that broken chain she'd found in her pocket 3 months after her son's funeral. The same command structure. The same sacrifice. The new curriculum is ready, Brooke said, sliding into the chair across from him. 36 hours of training on military medical terminology, combat trauma presentations, veteran-specific support protocols. Every ED staff member, every floor nurse, every administrator. Mandatory by the end of the fiscal year. Reeves smiled, the kind of smile that says a man is watching someone finally step into their full authority. Your son would be proud. This work honors his service. Brooke reached into her pocket and touched the dog tag there, the one from that broken chain, the one she'd kept every day since. Not as a weight of loss anymore. As a reminder of purpose. Through the coffee shop window, she could see the parking lot, the rain beginning to fall again, the world continuing on with its small dramas and ordinary forgettings. And somewhere in that ordinary darkness, Todd Brennan was walking toward his car, carrying the consequence of a choice he'd made in that mall, in that moment, when a disabled veteran needed someone to stand with him and he'd chosen to look away. She felt no triumph in his fall. Only the quiet dignity of knowing that when the moment came, she'd chosen to protect rather than ignore, to act rather to look away. And that choice had made all the difference. Heroes walk among us. Sometimes in scrubs, saving lives in the dark. If this story moved you, if you believe in honoring the service of our military and standing up for those who've sacrificed, please like this video, subscribe to this channel, and share your own story in the comments. What would you have done at that mall? Let's continue this conversation together.